My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Reacher Season 1. In this review, we'll have some spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Now, I'm not a big Jack Reacher fan. I've never read the books because I don't really read books. I've seen the two movies. The second one is really bad, but the first one is decent enough. I thought the main performance by Tom Cruise is really good. It has some funny moments, it has some great action, but it's bogged down by really generic plot, and that's pretty much my thoughts on this TV show as well. Great action, great lead performance, but really generic. Let's talk about Alan Richardson because I think he's really good here. In fact, I think this is a star-making performance. He carries this show incredibly well. He's stoic, but he's also charismatic enough, and he just really makes this character his own. Alan Richardson is really good in it, and while I was watching, I'm just like, okay, where do I recognize this guy from? I know I've seen him somewhere, and I'm just trying to figure it out. And then I looked it up, I'm just like, oh my goodness, no way. I haven't watched it in a really long time, but back when I was in high school, I used to watch this show called Blue Mountain State, and it's pretty much a bunch of guys in college trying to have sex and drinking and partying and all that stuff. And one of the main characters, Thad, he's like the big womanizer. Everyone loves him. He's the life of the party. And it's the same guy. Completely different performance, but good nonetheless. And I do like the way this character's written. I thought he was introduced really well. Like in the first episode, he's walking down the road, he sees that a man is being physical with a woman, and he just gives him this look, and the guy is just like, I'm sorry, I'll stop. And then he goes into the diner, orders a pie, and before he can eat it, the cops surround him, and he looks around, sees that there's innocent people there, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone, so he surrenders. And just in a few minutes, you know everything you need to know about this character and how he is. He's also like massive, like he has a very imposing figure to him. And there's like one scene where he has zip ties around his arms and he just flexes and breaks them off, and I thought that was a really great moment. But I also love how he's very analytical. Like he can look at a person and he's just like, oh, well, looking at your shoes, you have some beer on it, so you just came from the bar, and judging by the rings around your eye, you're clearly not getting enough sleep, or whatever. And he just, like, breaks down where a person was or what a person is doing. And it's not grounded in reality at all. It's very far-fetched, but I always find it entertaining when movies and shows do this. It's what Sherlock Holmes does in every Sherlock Holmes adaptation ever. I find it entertaining there, and I find it entertaining here. I also think that he has some great lines before he fights someone. Like, there's one scene where there's like 4 guys who are surrounding him, and he's like, I'm gonna break 3 of your arms. And they're just like, why only 3? Well, one of you has to drive to the hospital. I thought that was a great line. And there's one scene near the end of the season where Finley's stuck in a motel and he's surrounded and he doesn't know how to get out. So he instructs him in what to do. And it just reminded me of the Bourne Ultimatum, and I thought that was a really good scene. But unfortunately, the rest of the cast did let me down. I thought they were lacking in any personality or charisma, and they just came across as cliche characters. At first, I liked the romance between Roscoe and Reacher, but they get together like 3 episodes into the season, so it's just, instead of all that build-up and then the payoff at the very end, it's a little bit of build-up, payoff, and then it's just stagnant for the rest of the season. You know, at the end of the season, they share this big romantic kiss, and it would have a lot more impact if they didn't already get together before that point. I just think they really mishandled the romance because it was sweet at first, but it went too fast, too soon, and had nowhere left to go. And the action in this show, surprisingly, is really good. I was surprised at how brutal this show was, mainly because my parents watched it and they enjoyed it, and they don't like brutal violence, but I was watching this show and I'm just like, really? You guys like this? It just shocked me. But I like the brutality, and I think the sound effects really added to it. Like when he punches someone, you really feel it. There's also this one great moment where he kills a guy because the guy is wearing a tie and he grabs onto it and he jumps off a staircase and he just chokes the guy to death, and that was just a really great brutal kill. But I do wish he met his match more often. Like, with a guy of his body type to be so big and threatening, and it's just so perfect at everything he does. I wish he met his match. Like, if the villains had the big henchman who every time they fight, he just barely gets out alive. That would be a lot more entertaining to me. They tried to do that in the second last episode, but it was very poorly handled because this guy just kicks everyone's ass the entire show. And then he comes across this one guy who nearly kills him, which I'm okay with. You know, you need tension, you need to raise the stakes. But this guy was like Gavin-sized. Like, he was a little twig. And he nearly killed this big hawking dude. Like, no, bullshit. Absolutely not. That would not happen like that. It really took me out of the show. It just wasn't grounded in reality at all in that moment. And if you're going to do that, at least, you know, have the guy be big. Because, I'm sorry, one punch from Jack Reacher on that guy would be dead. Just no way. Absolutely not. It really bothered me. But my big issue with this show, and the reason why I can't recommend it, is because I really did not like the story. I thought the story was as cliche and as forgettable as they come. I couldn't have cared less about what happened at all. It's just so painfully generic and uninteresting, and it never grabbed me. Like, I was watching the show, but at no point was I invested in the story. I was kind of just tuning it out at a certain point. It was just that dull. Generic isn't always a bad thing. It depends on what the show or movie is. If you give me a cliche, generic haunted house movie that's actually really scary and effective, it might be generic and cliche, but I don't care because it's a horror movie and its job is to scare me, and as long as it does that, I'm okay with it. Insidious is one of my favorite movies ever. It's not a movie that you break down what it's about and what the meaning is behind it. It's a movie you watch and just get scared shitless while watching it, and I love it for that reason. Dumb and Dumber is one of my favorite comedies, but it's a cliche, generic road trip movie. Why I love that movie so much is because it's trying to be funny and it succeeds at it. One of my favorite action movies is The Raid Redemption. It has a very similar plot to Die Hard and Dread, but as generic and cliche as that movie's plot is, I still love it because it's trying to be a badass action movie and it succeeds at that. So what is this show trying to do? And it's quite clear that they spend so much time on this story, on all these twists and turns and who's turning up dead and who's not, that they expect you to get invested in the story. And that just was where the show fell apart for me. The strengths of the show was Alan Richardson and the action. Lean into that. I could forgive a generic 2-hour-long movie if the lead was good and the action was great, but at 8 hours, it's too much. But the show makes a mistake that lots of shows and movies like this one make, and it's that it doesn't lean into the mystery genre. It's trying to be a mystery of who's behind everything. So lean into the mystery aspect. I love Knives Out. I think that movie is brilliant. And I like the fact that it leans into the mystery aspect of the plot. I'm not saying this has to be a whodunit, but give us some clues, give us some suspects, have some fun with it. But they refuse to do so. They'd rather just give you the same paint-by-numbers, cliche, who killed this person plot that I just don't care about. I don't care about it at all. And it's like I said, know what you are. If this show was Alan Richardson as Jack Reacher, stuck in a building filled with these bad guys for 8 hours, and it delivered some great action, had a great performance by him, I'd be all for it. That's where the show was doing right, the action, the brutality, and the main performance. But it just got caught up in all this convoluted nonsense that it really bogs this show down. Also, it really annoyed me that whenever they had to meet up with someone, it was so obviously they were going to die or get killed, and it just became so overdone to a certain point. And it's also really dumb how Jack Reacher just kind of takes over this case, even though he has no jurisdiction with it. Like, they keep telling him, Richo, you're not a cop. Go home. And he's just like, hey, I want to see this suit. And then they're just like, oh, I guess we should let him. Really? Really? And I also think they made a mistake because I had a prediction for this show and it turned out I was wrong. But I thought for sure that it was going to turn out that his brother was still alive and that he was the villain behind everything. Because they were spending so much time on these flashbacks, I'm like, okay, they have to have a purpose. And then we don't see his brother's face, he just checks his arm and notice a bone mark, something that could be easy to imitate. So I'm like, okay, so the big twist is that it's going to be his brother behind everything. And no. In fact, they went in the most obvious, predictable direction possible. Like, the guy you think is going to be the main bad guy is the main bad guy. It took us 8 hours to get to that point. Like, I thought this show was going to be smarter than what it is and have the twist of his brother showing up. It would add a personal angle to it, emotional stakes. But they just went in the most obvious, predictable, what any person watching the show's first thought would be on who the main bad guy is. They went that route. Like, typically that character would be the red herring, but here, he's the main bad guy. And because his brother is killed off at the beginning, we don't really see them together besides the flashbacks. It just leaves you wondering, what was the point of even having him killed off? Like, if you're going to do that, have emotional weight behind it. I use this show as an example all the time because it is an example of perfect storytelling, but Arcane has a tragic character moment early on, and you feel the weight of it for the rest of the season. And, like, he lost his brother, and it should have weight that carries throughout and tie into the main plot somehow, but it just doesn't. And then because his brother's already dead, they're relying on flashbacks to show you the backstory, but he's already dead. Like, it just doesn't work. It just feels like they're wasting all this time on flashbacks. Look, I just finished Lost. Reviews coming out for it in October. But I just finished Lost. And my goodness, the amount of time they spent on flashbacks in that show is absolutely ridiculous. And I know they did it with Arrow, and they've done it with a bunch of other shows, and just stop with the flashbacks. Have flashbacks if they serve a purpose, but don't have flashbacks for the sake of it. Like, I feel like at these meetings now when they pitch a show, they're like, okay, well, what kind of flashbacks are going to be in this show? Just stop. If there's no purpose, stop it. Not every show needs flashbacks. They just took up time. But overall, this show is not good. Alan Richardson is really good in the show. I think he makes this character his own. I like the action. I was surprised at the brutality behind it. But the story is just so generic. It's impossible to get by. There is nothing remarkable about anything going on. Nothing that happens is going to stay with me in any sense. It is the most generic kind of story they could have possibly made for this show. It lacks any bit of weight or depth. It lacks any bit of emotion. I don't even think any of the characters go through real arcs. It's a very shallow story, and it just ruins what had potential to be a lot more. So I'm going to go ahead and give Reacher Season 1 a 4 out of 10. You know, some people call me Reacher because I'm 6'5", so I'm always reaching. Yeah, okay, that wasn't my best. But have you seen Reacher Season 1? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.